My name is Barney Jordaan. I was Professor of Negotiation at Stellenbosch Business School. I still hold an appointment as so-called Extraordinary Professor at the Business School. But currently I teach at Vlerick Business School in Belgium, where I also live with my family. My main focus of research and teaching is the area of negotiation, conflict resolution, and mediation. While at Stellenbosch Business School, I established the Africa Center for Dispute Settlement in 2008. The core focus of that was to improve the way in which businesses in particular resolve differences within the business, but also between business and service providers, business and government, business and other businesses as well. And that is still very much my mission at Vlerick as well, to improve the level of dispute resolution competence within organizations so that they can resolve their disputes amicably and not through civilized warfare such as litigation. Well, there are disputes within the organization, of course, between employer and employees, between employers and trade unions, but also interpersonal disputes between people within the same team, for example. And those can be very debilitating for organizations. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time, and of course it can be very destructive of the kind of team spirit that one needs for productivity and profitability. But there are also disputes between businesses and regulators for licenses, or for related purposes, or disputes within public-private sector partnerships, which, if they are referred to litigation, can actually stall these processes or can destroy the relationships completely. So we help businesses to resolve their disputes more amicably around the table, or if necessary through the use of a third-party mediator, to not only save cost, but also to save potentially important relationships. There are also disputes, of course, between businesses and trade unions. That's pretty much part of the focal area as well, and also disputes between businesses and stakeholders, such as service providers, such as customers, such as clients, and others as well. Oh, not at all. I think that's one of the problems that we have. You know, we are averse to conflicts and disputes. We'd rather ignore them, we'd pretend that they're not there, or we'll just pass the buck to a lawyer or HR to solve it for us. But we need to start looking at differences, at conflicts and disputes as a potential opportunity, as a resource from which we can learn. There's a lot of research and also practical experience shows that if one can engage with conflict in a constructive way, it can actually enhance performance, it can enhance cohesion within teams, and it can certainly build relationships and trust as well. But then it has to be managed properly, and one has to approach it with the right mindset or the right frame of mind. You need to see it as an opportunity and not necessarily as an evil that has to be avoided. Absolutely. You know, it raises so many disputes, not just between Volkswagen and regulators, but also between Volkswagen and their customers. It's an ideal case study for the use of more amicable forms of dispute resolution. You know, if these disputes drag on, there's not only time and cost that goes into it, there's also reputational damage. And by becoming more effective in the resolution of your disputes, a lot of that can be avoided. Reputational damage is often a result of conflict that's not managed properly. You know, what you often find is an organization is in crisis, whether it's BP with the oil spills, whether it's Volkswagen, whether it's BlackBerry, and the first response is to deny. Or the first response is to say, let's defend ourselves, instead of saying, there's nothing wrong in engaging with people who are in dispute with you and making the first move in their direction. Say, look, I know we can fight about this, but we can also talk about this. It should not be seen as a sign of weakness, but it should actually be seen as a sign of leadership and strength. But it's hard to change that mindset in organizations. We are almost hardwired to fight and flee. And the fight response means that we use our power, our authority, our status to solve the problems, or we run to the law. And speaking as a lawyer myself, I know how destructive that can be of relationships. And we also know that if I have power and I use my power to solve the problems, I can only control the exercise of my power. I can't control the consequences. The fact that I'm a superpower means I can bomb any country in the world, but I can't control the consequences of the exercise of my power. As a manager, I can tell people what to do. As a father, I can tell my kids what to do. But using that as my first response is actually short-sighted, because by exercising my power to solve the problem, I lose power. I lose control over their response. So power and litigation, legal remedy should be the last resort. We need to learn to engage by dialogue, by negotiation, or through the intervention of a third-party mediator who can help us solve these problems quickly and effectively. Heindrich, that is, of course, a very difficult question to answer, but let me try and answer it this way. Let's start, for example, with the refugee crisis in Europe. Different example, but the same thing at work. Refugees stream into Western Europe. Immediately people respond either with empathy, let's go and help them, or with fear. If the response is one of fear, the brain says, who are these people we fear? And then we notice the differences. These people are different. They come from a different country, they're a different color, they talk a different language, they practice a different religion. The conclusion is, this is the enemy. And then we make very important decisions about how to deal with this threat. Get rid of the Schengen Accord, put up the fences, deport people. Now, who knows? Those might be options, but we need to engage in a more rational way. We need to sit down and say, okay, those could be options, but let's first understand the problem correctly. How big is this problem? And are there not other solutions that we can apply that not only takes care of our concerns, but also upholds the values that we profess? And Europe is in danger of not living up to its own value system. With the attacks in Brussels, of course, that's a big wake-up call for everybody. And while one can never, ever justify what has happened, I think it also says to us we need to be engaging with those people who think the only option that they have is to leave the country, be trained, and come back and terrorize and kill people. We need to engage with people, not just at an economic level, employ people, but we need to look at social engagement as well. I have a group of, or just finished with a group of students from Vlerick here at Stellenbosch. We brought them out for the week to get to know the South African experience. And in a feedback session today, I asked them, is there anything you can take back to Belgium from your experience? And all of them said, the importance of social engagement, the importance of doing business not just for individual benefit, but for the social good. And I think if we can in Europe start looking not just as ourselves as individuals living on islands, but as people who have responsibility also towards those who come onto our shores, who have been displaced, how can we help them? How can we engage with them? Not for their sake necessarily, but for our own sake. If we don't engage with those people, if we don't understand their history, where they're coming from, if we don't understand their needs and desires, that creates a crisis for us. So we should help people, we should engage with people, teach them skills, help them set up businesses, use their innovation, use their experience, not just for their sake, but ultimately for our own sake and that of our children. But I think that's a message that applies everywhere in the world. Now, leadership, of course, is something that has lately grown out of all proportion, and one gets all sorts of esoteric types of leadership. But at its core, I think relationship is about, leadership is about getting back to basics. And what are those basics? Is we need to build relationships with the people whom we might need in future. We need to communicate with people by listening to people. We need to drop our egos a notch or two and say, I am not the holder of all the wisdom in the world. If I have to make a decision as a leader, I need to get the best information I can to improve my decision making. Where do I get this information from? From the very people that I'm leading. They know more about the job than me. Let me engage with them, get that information, and then I make a decision and I improve my decision making. But so often, leadership is more about decisiveness. You know, we like people who are just able to make quick decisions, and unfortunately, those quick decisions are not always sustainable because they're based on limited decision making, sometimes foolhardiness where people just refuse to listen to others' points of view. Whereas we see that the better leaders are those who have two core qualities. There's a humility saying, I don't have all the wisdom. Let me engage with others. But there's also decisiveness. People say, I've got enough information now, and I'll make a final and binding decision here. Or I'll plot chart the course forward once I have engaged with others. It's pretty much the kind of leadership style that Nelson Mandela himself proposed. He said, I lead from behind. I know where I want to go. I have a vision. I have a direction. But I walk behind my people, and I try and encourage them to walk in my direction. But if there's danger, I step to the front. So on the one hand, I'm inclusive in my leadership, but I'm also decisive when I need to be decisive. And I think that kind of leadership I find is missing. It's missing in political environment. It's missing in the business environment. Well, it's a tough question, but I think the long and the short of it is that ethical behavior can never let you down. If you behave unethically, there's always a chance that you will be found out. And then you have to deal with the fallout and the reputational damage. And we can already see what's happening. Those who are being fingered in the whole saga, their initial response is to deny, I did nothing wrong. But eventually they will fall because the information will eventually be overwhelming and they will be shown up to have lied. So our initial response is to deny, to defend, but eventually the truth does surface. So I think that it's simply a question of that ethical business practices are far better than underhand ones.